I'm joined now by the co-directors of This Is My Desire, Chuko and Arie Esiri. Before we discuss the film, I wanted to again mention that New Directors, New Films is supported by Film at Lincoln Center's New Wave membership program, and Film at MoMA is made possible by Chanel, with additional support provided by the annual Film Fund. All right, well, welcome back, Chuko and Arie. I think we could probably just begin at the beginning with sort of the origins of the film. I think I'm specifically interested, I think, in the writing of the film. Chuko, I think you were the primary writers, I believe, and I'm wondering at what stage. Like specifically this kind of parallel or like bifurcated sort of narrative came into the mix, and maybe just kind of generally how the writing of the film proceeded.
The decision to split the film into chapters, it came much later on in the writing. It was actually a result of in my last year at film school. I was at NYU, and in my last year at school, we had a producing class, or it was more like a business of producing type sort of class. And one of the classmates sent around. It was the Gina Davis Institute, their first gender parity study that they did at USC. So this is like 2014 or something like that. But they did this study, and I was reading through it, and I personally found I was very guilty of sort of relegating female characters to supporting roles, and there were all these tropes that I'd like subconsciously fallen into, and so that made me rethink the whole thing, because initially it was very much Mofe's story, and Rosa was a supporting character in the original idea, and and I was just like, there's nothing worse than like finding out you're just like every other person out there. So when I went back home, I started thinking more about fleshing her out as a character, and started thinking more about some of the people I knew, and like as she grew and grew and grew, it got to the point where I was like, well, she may as well just have her own chapter, because there was no way to fit it in one, to fit it seamlessly in one story, in one narrative. So she ended up developing her own chapter. And I was watching films at the time, and I'd watched Days of Fatih Akin's The Edge of Heaven, and Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express, and these are films that are chaptered. And so it sort of gave me the confidence to just go ahead and do it. And through that whole experience, I found ways of speaking about different issues in the country, and of showing the different ways in which people travel. And so it ended up being a massive blessing. And even after that, there was a time when we tried mixing it up, where it was sort of bouncing between one or the other. But Arie, who is my boss, said that wasn't working. Let's go back to the chapters. So we went back to the chapters.
Oh, and I want to ask about the sort of, I guess this is related. I wanted to ask about the cast, but maybe first we should talk about Lagos. I think the film forwards like a very interesting representation of Lagos that kind of subverts maybe some of the in the West, like, like in Western cinema, sort of like what we, how we see it portrayed. Maybe could you guys talk a bit about filming there? And I guess it's both like, I'm curious about it, like you know, logistically in terms of like the actual experience of shooting a film there, but also just sort of like symbolically, or you know, sort of about like the figure that like Lagos cuts like in the film. So could you and then I would like to talk about the human characters in the film as well. So could you tell us a bit about that?
I'm interested in knowing what the Western perception is of Lagos actually, because I think one of the things that we went into it was feeling that it isn't really on screen much. But you know that I think it was a journalist with the New Yorker that once described Lagos as New York on acid. I can't, or was it LA Times? I can't remember, but that's something that sort of like stuck with us for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was written in like 2005 or six. So I'm curious if you had, you know, what have you experienced Lagos at all in media or?
Sure. Yeah. Yes. In films, yes. Like never in person. So like, you know, my sort of perspective is like informed by that. But I don't know. I mean, I would say, you know, I think like in Western representation and so on, it's yeah, it's probably like how to put it, it's like not thought yeah, it's perhaps not represented like in this way that I think you're kind of like you're talking about. Like it's not portrayed, it's not sort of framed and presented to people. But then I think like the maybe the kind of explosion of the like Nigerian film industry over like the century is kind of you know, that's also like exercising some influence on the way that people think about Lagos. So
Right.
yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that broadly speaking, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would say that that filming in Lagos is hard, and I think this has been one of the reasons why we haven't seen it as fleshed out, perhaps in other Lagos-based stories. But I know right from the writing, it was very important for us to be able to experience the city as a character. Um, and that meant, you know, really, despite my reservations, it meant sticking to every single one of the 48 locations that Chuko wrote. And I will admit, I did try to bring it down by at least half. But I think once we committed to it, we committed to it, and we did everything that we needed to make sure that it happened as seamlessly as possible. And that didn't come without its issues, shooting in the markets and things. I think at one stage a pineapple was thrown at a cameraman, but all ended well. It just requires a lot of preparation. You know, this is a city that has a very improvised type of infrastructure to it, and public transport is almost improvised as well. So it means all of the cast and crew staying in one location. There isn't anything like you arrive on set at a certain time. Everyone's just got to be in the same place and moving in the buses at the same time. Usually leaving like, you know, at least an hour ahead of schedule. We spent a lot of time in a lot of these neighborhoods that we shot in. Chuko spent a lot of time in Mushing. Mushing is where the two main characters live. But Chuko spent a lot of time in there. Actually rented one of the apartments. I think the one that Mofe lives in, he rented that for about a year, maybe a bit longer, and was constantly present in that neighborhood. And we were pretty much working with the locals in all of these places that we were shooting. Many of them appear in the film, either by accident or purposefully, which we absolutely loved. but yeah, lots and lots of preparation, I think, and not being afraid to rewrite the rules. I think this was something that some of our foreign crew, I think, had to get used to. Just the idea that, you know, films and life in general happens very differently at a very different type of pace in Lagos. So yeah, I mean, I could go on forever about this. There's just so much that's very unusual about shooting in that place that I'd love to share, but you know, time is limited.
Yeah, it's up to you. But maybe we could we could talk a bit about the actors and how they kind of they're negotiating their environment sort of on set and so on, how the two of you worked with them. And because it's obviously a really extraordinary cast in the film. I think particularly the two leads. So maybe could we talk a bit about how like the casting proceeded, and then and maybe a bit about how you guys worked with the actors. The film is, I think they're working in like a very interesting register, and it's like it's not too much, it's not too little, you know. It's kind of I mean, could you tell us a bit about, I guess, like how you populated the film with these performers and how you worked with them?
Sure, yeah, I'll talk about Jude Akuwudike, who plays Mofe, and then Chuko can speak about the rest of the cast. So I had seen Jude in a play in the UK. Well, at that stage, actually, I'd seen him in two plays. One of them was a radio play. But I had seen him play in the UK many years ago, actually, probably like 2010 or something like this. He'd always made a really big impression on me, and I'd sort of come across his work a few times over the years. I'm not quite sure which draft of the script it was, because Mofe was actually written slightly younger, but that changed when I just had this, whatever, I don't know what we'll call it, an epiphany or whatever, that Jude totally should be the lead. I just felt like he really fit the character and wears a lot of his expressions on his face naturally. And I also knew that he hadn't. I just felt like he hadn't been on screen enough. He's a pretty prominent stage actor in the UK, but I'd always thought it was a shame that he hadn't been on screen. And I had told him once, and he doesn't remember, many years ago, after the radio play, I said, "Oh, we're gonna work together one day. I absolutely love the stuff that you do." But I wasn't even a film student at the time, so it didn't really make sense to him. I would just say, which is why he also doesn't remember. But yeah, so we reached out to him. I was actually at that time at the radio play. I was in the presence of Temi Ami-Williams, who plays Sheyi in the film, and has worked with Jude in many different capacities. And Temi was a friend of ours. So we just got in touch with his agents, and then sent him the script. And it was it was sort of love at first read, which was very fortunate for us. And he ended up coming to do the film. He had not been back to Nigeria in a real way since the war. He was sick. Since the Civil War. Biafra. He left when he was 6. As a result of that, his family emigrated, and he had come back, I think, in 2010 to bury his father. But this was the first time that he was going to be in Nigeria for as long as he was for the shooting of the film. So there was just this really wonderful process of sort of like re-imbibing him in the culture, let's say. And getting him familiar with some of the places that we'd be shooting, the real life Mofe, let's say, a couple of the electricians that we know that are just brilliant people. Spending time with them, spending time with Balande, which is the market where he gets his coat and his sew, and he gets all that stuff sewn. um, yeah, that was what it was like really with Jude. I think for us, the most important thing for him was getting him reacquainted with home, and just getting him familiar with the rhythms of life. And then he was they're definitely professional actors in the film, um, but sort of he I guess was more used um, to the, let's say, non-Nollywood way of making movies, which is sort of lengthier, more drawn out. Nollywood happens in like 2 weeks, is a very different type of rhythm. So sort of he already had that stamina, and I think that was also why it was important for us to bring someone with that experience as well, just to balance out our mix of non-actors, our mix of very, very new actors, and then our mix of veteran Nigerian actors who also have a different way of doing things.
Yeah, and it probably introduced would you say it like introduced an element of maybe spontaneity or something kind of like unprocessed or unsynthesized about his like response to things, that he's also living this experience of this kind of like homecoming and this like this kind of like I don't know if re-immersion is like the right word or not, but it would seem to me it's like even like the most trained best actor in the world would probably have an effect on the way that they're performing if that was their circumstance.
Yeah, it did. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Chuko.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was actually
now you see how he works.
I was trying to fully understand the question. Is it that the fact that he had to sort of reacquaint himself with home affected his performance? Is that essentially what?
Yeah, enhanced it, because it's I'm just thinking like no amount of rehearsal or preparation or research or whatever would probably sort of exhaust just like the whole, I don't know, like the emotional effect that comes with that.
Oh yeah, I'd absolutely agree. I mean, I would, yeah, right down to the way he speaks. His pidgin English when he came was I would say outdated. And I mean, language changes so quick. Nigerian pidgin evolves at like the speed of light. Like if you're away for like a month and you haven't been speaking with people, you're out of the loop, and people know that, can tell that immediately. So that, for example, was something that you see in his performance, and that we felt change throughout his time being there. And then we actually rewrote the script for him in Nigerian pidgin English once he got there. But that's something that we couldn't have done beforehand. We could have done beforehand, but it would have been, I think, a bit confusing, maybe slightly overwhelming. But because we were watching the football games and the soccer games for you guys, we were watching the soccer games in the markets and things like that, and he was getting to speak to a lot of people. And then we also had everyone on set sort of like trying to communicate with him in pidgin, and he's naturally gifted with accents and a bit of a linguist himself. But yeah, that's one great example, I think. The language, he couldn't have got to where he did had he not come to Nigeria, to Lagos early, and spent time with people.
Yeah, this is a very timely reference to football slash soccer, given the events of the past 24 hours.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah. And Chuko, perhaps do you want to talk a bit about the rest of the cast, because it sounds like it's a mix of it's like there are some non-professionals and there are some like incredibly accomplished, like very like trained and sort of working professionals. So
we had we actually, the young lady that plays Rosa, Temi, I had seen, so she's an identical twin, and I'd seen her twin sister in a play like years ago, whilst I was writing, it was a college play because it was at the Lagos Theatre Festival, and it's a thing I go to every year. And theatre is a great place. Most of those actors actually came from theatre. The bulk of the professional actors were they ply their trade on the stage here in Nigeria. So I'd seen her in a play, and then I randomly ran into her at a gallery, and I was like, "Oh, we're casting a movie. I really want you to come and read." So we had
you didn't run into her. You ran into her twin sister.
No, oh yeah, her twin. No, yeah, her twin, Tolu, who I'd seen in the play, and having seen her in the play, I was like, "Please come and read for this film we're make." So we were having an open casting call, and I was like, "Come along." She was like, gave her the details, and she came with her identical twin Temi, and Temi ended up winning the role. But they were among the final three or four actors we had for that role. And Temi at the time of filming was a theatre arts student in University of Lagos. She actually graduated whilst we were in the middle of shooting. So it was her first film. Her sister Grace, Cynthia, was a child actor, and was just sort of getting back into TV and that sort of thing, because she was in her final year she's an accounting student in her final year at college, and so she was thinking, "Oh, I want to get back into performance," and so she came along. She was one of the people that we had a really great casting director called Lala Akindoju, who's also an actor in her own right. She plays the manager, the factory manager, Hope. And she did a really great job of, she knows everybody. She did a really great job of getting people that we'd have discussions about how we imagine these characters, and she did a great job of finding actors for the role. So that's sort of how it came along that way. We saw a lot of people, and for some of them for Wisdom, who's Mofe's apprentice, that was a role we're really struggling to find an actor for. So we ended up going to the University of Ibadan, which is like in a neighboring state, and we had like a casting call for their theater departments, and people came in. So Fortune was also in his junior year at college when we shot the film. And we got him from that excursion, and we got the character's called Tolu, Grace's best friend. She also was from that excursion. It was her and Cynthia for the final two for the role of Grace. And when she didn't get Grace, we put her in as Tolu. That was it really. It's kind of sort of it's an example of how things work here. It's kind of like it's got the structure of a traditional model, but then there's the stuff you have to improvise and make do and get done on the side. But that's pretty much how we put the cast.
I should also add, because I never mention him when we do these interviews, but we worked with a wonderful acting coach called Nicholas Monu, who sort of trained in the UK and is Nigerian himself, and lives in Austria now. But he worked with the two young leads, Rosa and Grace, in the film, and did an amazing job with them. It was great to have him sort of prepare them for film and for film shooting, which he just does so well. But it also really helped with their camaraderie. So, whilst we were shooting Mofe's chapter, Cynthia and Temi, the two actors, were doing lots of like role play exercises, lots of kind of before the movie kind of scenarios, which were really, really great. Brought them, made them really, really close by the time we got to shooting. I think that made a really big difference as well.
I also wanted to, of course, ask about your collaboration with your cinematographer. I hope I'll get this right. I think it's Arseni Khachaturian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the film is like it's like a, you know, very pretty much a joy to look at throughout. You know, it's this very rich 35 millimeter image that is like vibrant when it needs to be, and you know, so I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the collaboration with your cinematographer, and maybe a bit I'm also like in relation to the actors, like I think the blocking in the film is quite interesting. I think the camera's never too close to the performers. I think it seems like you guys insisted on a certain amount of perhaps necessary distance in the way the camera in the camera's position relative to the performers. So sort of how did you and Arseni kind of like conceptualize like the way that would work?
Yeah, it's funny that you should mention the distance of the camera, because the film, which is being released in Nigeria this week, they were doing promo and press, and the people out there kept asking for for like close-ups. I was like, yeah, like 3 in the movie. I can provide them for you, but it was an issue, this distance thing, promoting the film. But yeah, we definitely wanted to we wanted to make this feel as observational as possible. We want to sort of we wanted to try and include the audience in the frames, if that makes sense. Which actually proved sort of, you know, I think trickier than one thing, sort of like making a film with these close-ups and having people emote and be and blocking things in a way that feels like real life. We shot on 16 millimeter actually.
Sorry.
And one of but that this was one of the reasons for that, and why we stayed in the standard format of 16 was to have the ability to chop up space a bit more, so you weren't necessarily sort of wall to wall. Also because these spaces that the characters inhabit, they're small, but they don't feel small to the characters, and they don't feel small even to us as well. I mean, as a crew, you're packing quite a few people into one small room. You feel it then, but you get accustomed to working in small spaces, and small spaces don't feel small anymore. So that's why we kept it that sort of squarish kind of format, or aspect ratio. But that also lends itself to portraiture. Even when you're not right up in someone's face, you still feel there's a level of intimacy that you arrive at. And 16, I think film also does that. There is I think particularly Lagos is such a textured place, and that has a wonderful range of skin tones and vibrant colors. That dynamic range is something that really, really lends itself to the way the film is photographed. I think the production design by Tyson Maluf, who's a Brazilian, makes a world of difference in terms of how you experience the film visually. Like, she did so much amazing work putting color into a lot of these rooms, whether it was window panels, the subtlest, smallest details. She made every single room we walked into an absolute joy to photograph, and it was very, very deliberate. She's an absolute genius. And a lot of the rooms that we went into are empty. You know, she spent like 5 weeks in Lagos before we started shooting, visiting people's homes, getting familiar with how they sort of, even how they buy, they shop, where they shop, trading new things that she bought for older things. all of that makes its way into the film and lends itself to the photography. Then working with Arseni was also a joy. Arseni, I had met him during film school. He was the DP of someone that I was at Columbia with, who had a film at New Directors, New Films last year, the beginning. He shot that movie. After Eyimofe, actually, funnily enough. But we had met several years ago, and I'd always had an interest in working with him. He also came out early, and I basically just told him everything I told you now about how we wanted to shoot the film, and he was game, which was brilliant. The way that we work together, I tend to spend more time with the camera.
Yeah.
And Chuko spent more time with the actors, I think, naturally, because Chuko also wrote the script. We just had that great luxury of being in two places at once. So whilst I'd be sort of preparing let's say the visual architecture of the film, Chuko would be working hand in hand with the actors in rehearsals. We're both very sad that we couldn't both be in those places, but the pace at which we had to make things at times made us have to do that. But it meant that at the end of the day, Chuko brought his tape from rehearsals, and I brought my whatever it was, shot lists and maps, and we would just we would generally agree on the stuff that we were presenting at the end of the day, and had that common language going onto set, so that the crew didn't think that we were completely crazy and too much.
Yeah, I always like to with co-directors, I always like to ask about this sort of like division of labor, so to speak, which so thank you for just for just getting to that. And also I should know, it looked like 16 millimeter to me, but then I saw in a trade review someone said it was 35, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe.
Don't believe the press, Dan.
Yeah,
don't believe the press.
It was a prominent trade publication as well. Well, I think we're starting to run out of time, so I just wanted to ask, maybe I can ask one more thing before I let you guys go. I mean, I think some films that were perhaps on your mind or were important in some way for thinking through what the film would be. We talked about that a little bit, but also, like, for me in watching the film, I got this strong feeling of like I think it, like, there's something literary about the film. I found it has this.
You just made Chuko's week.
Oh, good. No, it has. There's something about the rhythm, the structure, and sort of where by the end of the film, like where we as an audience end up, that feels kind of like it might have something to do with literature and like this almost like classical novel sort of like idea. So I don't know, was that like relevant? I guess it was relevant to
yeah,
you.
it was the two biggest references for, I mean, outside of, so our major references were New Taiwanese, the films of New Taiwanese cinema, Ho Xiaoshen, Edward Yang in particular.
Yeah.
And my feeling when I watched those films was exactly what you're speaking about. It's like, oh, sometimes, I mean, I remember watching A Brighter Summer Day, and it felt like, the motion I had at the end of that film was the same one I have when I read like Dostoevsky or something. And in looking at it, it's also part of why we decided to be objective in the way you shoot the film, so that our feeling was that it allows the audience to sort of get used to the locations and get used to all the colors and all the chaos, and once you're used to that 25 minutes into the film, you can sort of detach and just be involved with the characters. But the largest reference that during writing, when I was still trying to figure out what it is I'm trying to do, it was I reread. I have my annual pilgrimage to James Joyce's Dubliners, and And I'm the person that they write the introductions for at the start of the book. So I read the book, then I go to the introduction. And in the introduction, he said there was an excerpt from a letter he wrote to his brother, in which he said something along the lines of considering how large and important Dublin is as a capital, it's a wonder that it hasn't been given a world of its own. And I was like, oh, that's exactly it with Lagos. And he spoke about he felt that the Irish couldn't move forward unless they took a good look at themselves in his well-polished looking glass. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly, it's 12 stories in Dubliners, and through that you get an experience of the city, of the culture, of its people. That was a huge reference for me in writing. That was sort of like one of those moments where it's like, oh, I understand. This is what I've been trying to say, to do. And with Dickens, it was Bleak House. And what he does so amazingly in Bleak House is it's each location. You've got the Chancery, you've got Bleak House itself, and then Tom Alone, which is the slums. And they are all so definite, and the characters there, the environment really affects it's the external affecting the internal. And I really love the way he did that, the way he gave each neighborhood and the characters in those neighborhoods very specific attitudes and behaviors, and it was sort of mixing those things up. But a lot of that was in what we wanted from the film. We're really trying to present something that just sort of eases you along. You sort of go along with it. Without sort of like the heavy guiding hand of plot or story or that was it. So yeah, you're completely right. As Arie said, you've made my week. That's it. He's not going to hear the end of this, so he's
Well, I think for selfish reasons, we'll end on that note. but no, I just want to say, like, thanks very much to you guys for joining us for this discussion, but most of all for this film. It's really something. So thank you both very much. And I don't know if you want to say anything by way of farewell, but
no, just the same thing. Thank you for taking time out. Thank you for speaking with us. Thank you to new directors, new films, for actually giving us this platform and this. It doesn't really get better, especially for two kids that went to film school in New York to be at this festival is like it's a real homecoming. But yeah, so just eternally grateful. Really, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Ditto.